Hello, everyone. Today you will find a story about the legendary Richie Gaspard. He competed at the Olympia 7 times and took second place 3 times, second only to the undefeated Lee Haney. He defeated such famous competitors as Robbie Robinson, Samir Banout, Gary Stridham, Bob Paris, and many other famous athletes in bodybuilding circles. The attitude towards Gaspari among bodybuilding fans is completely different. Some idolized him and called him the uncrowned Mr. Olympia. Others sincerely wondered how he could occupy such high places at all, cursed at his small stature, narrow shoulders, and wide waist. How did he win the Olympia as a little guy? Bodybuilding titans like Lee Labrada, Mike Christian, Albert Beckles, Barry DeMay, and many others. So, who is Rich Gaspari? A legend who didn't take the Sandow statuette just because he was unlucky enough to be born in the era of Lee Haney or the most overrated athlete in history. To understand this, let's go back in time and take a closer look at Rich's career. Gaspari was born on May 16, 1963 in New Brunswick, New Jersey. This is a small settlement in the east of the country which did not have a developed sports infrastructure in the 60s. An accident helped our hero to start training today. At the age of 13, Rich contracted mononucleosis. After being discharged from the hospital, he barely weighed 50 kilos and looked very emaciated. Doctors advised him to lift weights to recover. Gaspari took a thorough approach to the matter and got a book by Bruce Randall with training complexes, which he began to practice. The training took place at home, thanks to Rich's older brother, who had a bench press. And after a year of training, our hero increased to 75 kilograms with a height of 170 centimeters. The real obsession with bodybuilding came to him 2 years later at the age of 15, after reading the popular comic books about superheroes Batman, the Incredible Hulk, and others. The strong, muscular characters made the boy wonder if an ordinary person could look like that. The answer was found on the pages of a bodybuilding magazine. Dave Draper, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno. These guys really looked like superheroes. At first, Rich started working out in the gym 6 days a week. However, he soon began to notice that under this regime, the muscles, as well as the nervous system, did not have time to recover and progress was very slow. Then he decides to reduce the intensity of his workouts a little and start spending only 4 days a week in the gym. This training plan turned out to be the most optimal for our hero. At the age of 16, the future bodybuilding star already had 80 kilograms of lean muscle mass and was thinking about making his competitive debut. Rich's first tournament was called The Physicist. It was a local competition. Gaspari competed among juniors and took 6th place. One of the judges approached him and asked how old he was. When the judge heard that Rich was only 16, he couldn't hide his amazement. "This is what 16 years looks like. You definitely need to keep going, man." However, do not think that Rich was fixated on bodybuilding alone at that time. After school, he went to university where he studied medicine and business because he was sure that this knowledge would be useful to him in the future. At the age of 20, Gaspari took first place at the Nationals 83 Junior Tournament, and a year later he received an IFBB professional card, taking the title of Mr. Universe Light Heavyweight. It wasn't just a victory, it was a record. Rich became the youngest Mr. Universe in the history of the competition. In the same year, 1984, he excelled at the Adult Nationals Tournament, beating Matt Mendenhall and Jeffrey Williams. Then Rich was noticed by the owner of the Jim Gold's franchise, Ed Connors, and invited him to train in California. Gaspari was over the moon with Albert Beckles, Bertil Fox, Corey Everson, Rick Wayne, and even Lee Haney rocking next to him. "I remember Lee amazed me with his incredible back width and tiny waist, and he was very tall," Gaspari recalled. At that time, Haney was just about to win the 1984 Mr. Olympia title. The first truly major tournament in which bodybuilder Rich Gaspari participated was the Night of Champions in 1985. The young man impressed not only the audience but also the judges with his finely honed muscles. As a result, he took second place in the fight, losing only to his partner in the Albert Beckles gym. Many judges said back then that he was better than the champion. But Rich wasn't upset because he was barely 22 years old at the time. Next was the Olympia in Brussels, Belgium, in third place after Lee Haney and Albert Beckles. It was an incredible shock for young Rich, just a shock. I stood next to him and posed with the legendary Sergio Oliva, my childhood idol. "It's impossible to put it into words," Rich exclaimed. Our hero then received $10,000 in prize money, and most importantly, recognition came to him. Fame, endless interviews, magazine covers, advertising contracts, and fan worship descended on the young talent. Strangely enough, Gaspari did not have a contract with Joe Weider, and he earned all his money by traveling with seminars and guest posing. The following year, in 1986, he won 2 tournaments, takes gold at the World PRO Championships in Los Angeles PRO. Mike Christian and Frank Richard took the second and third places both times, and then there was his second Olympia. This 1986 tournament in Columbus could be called quite successful for Gaspari, as he rose from third place to second. But it was still not the same. Gaspari needed the title of Mr. Olympia. In order to beat the strongest competitors, he maintained in optimal shape one of the most impressive musculature in bodybuilding of that era. At least look at the athlete's anthropometric data. With a height of no more than 172 centimeters, he boasted a competitive weight of about 98 kilograms. And in the off-season, the weight went up to 110 altogether. However, Rich felt that he did not have enough mass, and at the Olympia 87 in Sweden, he set a record weight of 102.5 kilograms. But it did not bring victory. Second place again. After Olympia, Gaspari participated in 3 Grand Prix events. He won in France and Germany. But in Germany that year, another Grand Prix was held with the participation of Lee Haney, and our hero again came second. The great Lee was simply invincible. In 1988, Rich traveled around Europe, taking part in various competitions in the Old World. Wins in Italy, France, Spain, Germany. Becomes the second in Greece and Britain, both times losing to Lee Labrada. But he doesn't care much about that. The main idea becomes the idea of defeating the other Lee Haney. Gaspari devoted himself completely to this goal. He even started having problems with girls because Rich lived only by bodybuilding. In preparation for Olympia 88, Gaspari completely changed his strategy. "In previous years, I was fixated on becoming as big as possible," he confessed. "I thought that only by becoming huge would I be able to defeat Lee Haney. But Joe Weider advised me to stop chasing the masses. Haney is so big that no matter how hard I tried to gain weight, I couldn't compete with him in size. Therefore, my goal was to make such a relief that the size of the face will not matter against it. It will simply look smooth." At Olympia 88, Rich took to the stage in the best shape of his life, more prominent than ever with a weight of 95 kilograms against the 110-kilogram Lee Haney. His free program was great, he was the best by a margin, and this is 1.5 dozen of the best bodybuilders on the planet. But the judges again gave the coveted statuette to Sando Haney. They even began to laugh at Gaspari, comparing her to a bride who would never get married. However, the bitterness of failure softened success. On March 11, 89 in Columbus, Rich Gaspari made history as the first winner of the Arnold Classic tournament. The victory in Columbus came at a great time. "I was over the moon," Rich confessed. At this tournament, Gaspari put up a record low 93 kilograms for himself, but it was worth it. The champion had various thoughts in his head, including about ending his career, but he couldn't make a decision and everything went on as usual. Gaspari was invited to Italy, and since his ancestors lived in that country and he spoke a little Italian, and Olympia 89 was supposed to be held here, he decided to stay and prepare for the tournament in Italy. It turned out later that it was a mistake. Rich had strayed too far from his roots, plus the equipment in the gym was poor and he couldn't diet properly. As a result, Gaspari finished only 4th, passing ahead in addition to Haney and Labrada, the new star Vince Taylor. For most athletes, 4th place at the Olympic Games is the limit of their dreams, but not for Gaspari. It was a tragedy for him. The Olympia of the 90s in Chicago made history by the fact that the Weider brothers introduced a doping test on it. They wanted to make bodybuilding an Olympic sport, and they knew that steroids wouldn't let them do it. But if, for example, the same labrada perfectly adapted to the new conditions, then Gaspari could not. He took 5th place even though he knew he was capable of more. 5 athletes, including Mohamed Benaziza and Barry DeMay, were eliminated from the competition. And at that moment, the guys from the new WBF Federation began to persuade Gaspari. He was offered a fabulous 2-year contract worth $500,000, $250,000 for each year. This meant a secure life without wandering around the world with seminars and guest posing. Yes, the articles and covers in Vader's magazines were great free advertising, but Vader still didn't pay Rich money. Thanks to the WBF, he started doing this and offered Gaspari a contract. But its amount was decent, but not comparable to the offers of the WBF. The guys from the new federation almost persuaded Rich, but at the last moment he refused. I understood that a contract with the WBF meant a lifetime disqualification from the IFBB, but even if I had been allowed to return in a year or two, my career in sports would have been over. As a result, Gaspari remains in the IFBB, and in 1991 he performed at only 2 starts. At the Arnold Classic, he becomes 7th, and at the Mr. Olympia, which was his last in his career, he takes only 10th place. The cancellation of the doping test by the Weider brothers led to the fact that new bodybuilding stars such as Dorian Yates, Sonny Schmidt, Francis Benfato then exhibited a fiery form, not to mention Sean Ray and Lee Haney. According to many experts, it was the following 92nd year and the victory of Yates that put an end to aesthetics in bodybuilding and marked the beginning of the era of mass and monstrosity, which continues to this day. This was confirmed by the Arnold Classic tournament of '92, in which Rich took only 13th place. And that's when he said to himself, "That's enough." Plus, at that time he had a difficult period in his life and he divorced his wife. He really had enough money. In the '90s, Gaspari acquired a fitness center, but as an athlete, it's over. Rich stopped performing and didn't touch the iron at all for 6 months. Vader terminated his contract with him, but our hero had enough work in the gym, plus he continued to travel with seminars. 2 years later, Gaspari came up with a new idea to return to the competitive scene. As it turned out, it wasn't the best idea. On stage, Rich was a pale shadow of himself. From 1994 to 1996, he competed in 9 starts, and the results were disappointing. He didn't even get into the top 10. Unless the 5th place at the 1995 Toronto-Montreal Pro Tournament can somehow be counted as an asset. Nevertheless, in 1997, Gaspari was once again determined to take the stage at the Canada Cup and Champions Night. He weighed 111 kilograms and was not in bad shape, but then an injury happened, a pinched cervical vertebra which put him to bed for 2 months. Before, I was pressing 67 kilograms of dumbbells at an angle, but now I could barely lift 18 with my right hand, Rich recalled. My weight dropped to 85 kilograms and I couldn't even stand. The doctors threatened him that he would never be able to train and perform, but at the first opportunity, Gaspari returned to the gym and began to slowly recover. Rich burst into heavy sports like a flash, but he also burned out quickly. In the 90s, his performances were, to put it mildly, disastrous. Therefore, after several unsuccessful seasons, he decided to end his career. Oddly enough, there were positive aspects to the injury. Gaspari has a lot of free time to think about his life. Rich thought, why would he work for someone if he could come up with his own brand of sports nutrition and work only for himself? Moreover, he studied nutrition in college. That's how the Gaspari nutrition line of sports nutrition products was born. The career of bodybuilder Richie Gaspari began and ended at a time commonly referred to as the golden age of bodybuilding. According to the athlete's own words, the slogan of him and his colleagues in those years was the phrase, "Bodybuilding can do anything." But it was a belief not so much in the technique of pumping muscles as in the triumph of the human spirit over the laws of nature. Over time, Gaspari sold the gym and fully focused on his sports nutrition brand. He still trains 5 times a week for an hour and a half in the gym and is in great shape. That's all for today. Subscribe to the channel and thank you for watching. As always, I will be grateful for your support, It helps in the development of the channel. Do not forget to click on the bell so as not to miss the new issue. Sports Guru was with you. See you later.